Long ago, Socrates said the problem of knowledge is the key to all of our problems. When I read that long ago, I got real excited because I knew exactly what Socrates meant. I knew the biggest problem of knowledge we had was ignorance. I knew we didn't have knowledge of how to live. But I also realized there were reasons why we didn't know. In fact, I already had a list of problems of knowledge when I read that from Socrates. One reason why I got so excited, we were on the same page. Been working on that list for close to 3 decades. Interesting, the more pieces I found to this puzzle, the less total pieces I had, because I realized I could group things and say, well, let's not list all of those, we'll just call it one of these. Altogether, I've come up with 21 main problems of knowledge. 55 total problems of knowledge, because some of these problems of knowledge strike more than once. And then there are pieces within pieces. Today I want to talk about one of those problems of knowledge in particular. That has to do with our neocortex. And I often wonder to myself whether or not we are clever enough to overcome this negative ripple effect that we are perpetuating on this planet, where we pass down our mistakes to our children so they wake up or start their journey off in life with false knowledge. They make the same mistakes we make, and then they end up with the same problems we've been suffering with for millennium. And I'm wondering if we're clever enough to break that cycle. And many times I think we're just too clever for our own good. Kind of what got us in trouble, I believe, and I know it's one of the main reasons why we are stuck where we are. And I say that because I've been analyzing different TV shows over the years. Came upon a TV show the other day that I started to watch, and it didn't take me long to learn the lesson I need to learn from that, which was simply a reminder that most of us live to eat, and that variety is a spice of gluttony. And I say that because I was watching these shows about how these people were preparing their foods and how many spices they used in order to camouflage the eating of dead flesh. And I couldn't help but think of all these people relishing their dead flesh, thinking, oh, I can't give up my meat, realizing it wasn't the meat that they were wanting, it was all those spices. And it turned out they were putting half a dozen to a dozen different spices in their little recipes. If they're barbecuing meat, for example, they'd use a dozen different spices and marinate something for several hours to several days, several weeks. Then they would coat it with another dozen or so spices. And then when they would barbecue it, they would use special wood that gave it a certain flavor. And they showed as they cut into it how that smoke flavor went down so far into the flesh, which also was not just the smoke flavor, but all the spices are all put on the outside. And then they make this sauce that has another dozen or so spices. So here we are thinking that we just love the taste of dead animal flesh, when it's not the flavor of flesh at all. In fact, I remember reading long ago that kosher meat, if you drain the blood, has no flavor at all. And if you cook flesh all by itself, it won't have any flavor unless you do what some of these guys were doing in the TV show, where they'd use a special type of wood, whether it's mesquite or cherry or whatever, that it in itself could flavor the dead flesh with the smoke without the use of herbs. But the point here, my friends, is that we're not in love with dead flesh. We're just too clever for our own good. We figured out ways to camouflage this horrible, disgusting thing that we call food and make it acceptable to eat. We are so far removed from the killing of the animal. We're so far removed from the preparing of the food that we don't realize how much wasted energy we're putting into this huge mistake we're making. And it makes me think of that article that comes out every first of the year by U.S. News, and they rate all of our diets, and one of the criterion they use is whether it's relatively easy to follow. And they slammed a raw vegan diet as not being easy to follow when it's the easiest of all diets to follow. And then they tried to make it look like, well, it's not, because if you go into the gourmet raw foods, look how much time it takes to prepare things. And it's a joke compared to how much energy people are putting in to making these gourmet cooked food meals. It's just as labor intensive, just as many stages, just as many recipes. And it doesn't have to be that complicated if we want to make life simple. I don't spend any time at all preparing food unless I decide to eat a smaller salad and drink some of my vegetables in the form of juice, which I like to do every now and then. It may take me a half hour to make 2 to 3 quarts or liters of vegetable juice a day. And if I drink 2 or 3 of those, I can either go without a salad or eat a smaller salad. And the time it takes for me to make my juice is made up because I would have to take that much time to eat my salad. Now, obviously, for most of us, we'd go, hey, I'd rather be eating something than preparing something. And I agree. A lot more fun eating a real big salad as opposed to making some juice. But it's easier on my system. And I like the way it goes through me much better. Whenever I start eating big, bulky salads, I got a big bowl down here while I'm processing it. So I like the way it makes me look just by cutting back on the size of my salads. Because salads are very mechanical in the process. It's much more difficult to digest salads. And that doesn't even take into the fact that most people who are eating vegetables, if they're raw, we shouldn't be eating them. Things like broccoli and cauliflower. We should stick to the leafy greens if we're going to be eating vegetables. But remember, we're frugivores. We should be eating mainly fruit. And there's no preparation involved when it comes to eating some bananas or some mangoes or some papaya. There's nothing to it. It's easy. Grab some cherries, cherry moyas, you name it. It's the easiest diet there is to follow. Except, again, we're too clever. And now we're sick and we have the subsequent need for money, and now people use food as one way to make money. Either you grow it or you cook it and prepare it for people. So that's part of our problem. That's why it's a problem of knowledge. We're too clever for our own good. We got people to figure out how to make these fancy recipes to take food that would be so disgusting we wouldn't even consider eating unless we were starving, and add all these spices to it, and now it makes it convenient and easy. I remember long ago I read that the 2 biggest criterion long ago as far as what people chose to eat was the cost and the convenience. And that's, again, a problem we have in our society. We subsidize industries that provide food that are bad for us, when we should be subsidizing the foods that should be good for us, and we shouldn't even have to subsidize them. I should be able to come over here and start grabbing food and eating it right here. But that shows you how sick and far off we are as a species. So, is a raw food diet easy to follow? Is it easy to follow the standard American diet? Of course it is. That's why so many diets rated well in the U.S. News survey or rating system. Easy to follow. Yeah, everywhere you go, someone's trying to sell you some cooked food, aren't they? And some of them are really good at it. Again, we've become too clever for our own good. We've molested our taste buds with flavors that we should never be exposed to. The great news about how this works, however, is if you don't mind putting in the time to make these labor-intensive cooked food meals, you can do the same thing, use pretty much most of the same spices, not all of them, but you can use a lot of those spices, and you can make gourmet raw food meals if that's what you prefer to do. Or there are places that also sell these. The problem, of course, here is there's more cooked food restaurants than there are raw food restaurants. And the raw food restaurants are becoming more popular. And a lot has to do with everyone else, doesn't it? That's a big problem of knowledge right there. Is it's hard to break away from the herd. The herd mentality is also one of our problems of knowledge because we play follow the leader. So here we have this clever neocortex that can make tasty, yummy foods that molest our taste buds. And everybody's doing that, so we follow the leader. But we can take those 2 pieces to the puzzle and use them to our advantage. We can use this brilliant brain of ours to modify a solid food vacation on water and make it on juices. And then with this brilliant brain of ours, we could reach the tipping point where all of a sudden everyone realizes we're doing something wrong. And that when we quit making these mistakes, our life goes to another level. It's well worth it once we understand it. But until we reach the tipping point, we're going to continue to struggle, breaking away from the herd. But again, we can use this concept of the herd mentality to get us back on the right path. And that's where you guys play a role. You know what I'm talking about here, right? For most of you guys who've watched me for a while, you know exactly where I'm going with this. We're called trim tabs. We're the rudder on the rudder that's going to steer this ship the other way. Our herd's heading for a cliff, my friends. Our ship is heading for an iceberg. Got to turn the rudder, but we can't turn the rudder. It's too big. We got to turn the rudder on the rudder. And that's what we are on my YouTube channel. We are the trim tabs to society. We are the rudder on the rudder that's going to turn our rudder so we can turn our ship or our herd away from the cliff or the iceberg, whichever analogy we want to use here. We have that much control. We can use that brilliant brain. We can use the fact that we will play follow the leader if we can turn the rudder. So right now, the rudder is getting us in trouble, or the direction our ship is going is getting in trouble. The herd mentality is getting us in trouble, along with this clever neocortex of ours, but we can turn that around, folks. We can modify what used to be the best preparation for a better way of life. We can do a solid food vacation on juices for the appropriate length of time. We can be an example for everyone else. And the more people start doing this, the more the rudder on the rudder changes, the more the rudder changes. Then our ship finally stops going the direction it's going. And now it's going to be easy to follow our species-specific diet. Realizing, of course, as I say all the time, that only works in an ideal world. And we're no longer there. We might need to modify our species-specific diet just like we have to modify a water fast. Why? The world's not ideal. We've damaged ourselves, we've damaged the environment. So some people will say one size does not fit all, but that's deceptive when you start using that kind of language. Because we still have a species-specific diet based on the anatomical limitations we're born with. And we're all born with anatomy to only eat plants. But then we damage the environment, we damage ourselves. So now we might not get everything we need from those plants. And then some of us are born with genetic defects right off the bat. They have these anatomical limitations where they may not be able to do certain things that they should be able to do because they're damaged. It doesn't mean one size doesn't fit all. It means that we have to modify the species-specific diet to accommodate and adapt to the damage we've done to ourselves and the environment. So that's why I say there's a oneness of disease and then there's a uniqueness of disease. There's a oneness of disease based on the anatomical limitations we've been given at birth. Most of us have given the same anatomy and there's no difference. Some of us have damaged parts of our anatomy and that complicates things. It's not an indictment on our species-specific diet, it's an indictment on eating the wrong food, which is what created the birth defect to begin with. Look at Pottinger's cats. He saw that the cats that ate the altered food, the cooked food, developed more birth defects every generation. That's what's happening to us. Again, it's not an indictment on our species-specific diet. It's an indictment on the wrong food we've been eating and how that damages us. So this is really exciting to realize that the things that got us in trouble, this brilliant brain of ours, that got us addicted to anything that's pleasurable, we're able to come up with all these concoctions and turn something that's disgusting into something that's yummy. And then we can also take the herd mentality and use that to our benefit. We can work hard as the trim tabs on this planet to steer our ship away from that iceberg, to make sure the herd follows a different leader. We're following the wrong leader right now. We're headed for a cliff, but if you're in the middle of the herd, you can't see where we're headed, and you can't jump off to the side. Once you're in the middle of the herd, you can't get away. It's only those who realize they're in a herd and they're off to the side are the ones that are able to jump off and go back the other way. That's what Mark Twain meant when he said, anytime you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect, my friends. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's right. And what we're proposing here on my YouTube channel is not a fad. This is how we existed for the majority of our existence. It's time to go back the way we were. It's time to understand that some people are going to struggle, and that's not going to be an indictment on what we need to do, because we still have to respect these two groups of anatomical limitations. The one we're born with, we have a species-specific diet. Some people have defects, may struggle with that, and people may still struggle with that other group of needs because we've damaged ourselves in the environment. Might need to pop some pills. And was reading an article about how how we should be eating meat, another one of these dumb, stupid articles, and how that some of you might be disgusted with eating Oreo meat, so you can take a pill instead. My friends, if it's disgusting to eat it, what do you think? Again, we're so far removed from the actual killing of the animal, we don't realize the cruel and sinful thing we do. We're so far removed from preparing the food, most of us, that we don't understand how labor-intensive it is and how much of a joke it is to go that direction. And how we're molesting our taste buds. We're being tricked into fooled into thinking we like the flesh foods just because it happens to melt in our mouth. And I know some people argue that, oh, cooking is a form of pre-digestion. Well, yeah, it softens things up so it's easy. It can melt in your mouth, right? But have you ever seen a lion run over there and grab something and put it in his mouth and go, this just melts in my mouth? No, he wolfs it right down, doesn't he? He doesn't think twice about getting all bloody, killing something. But why do we do it? Because we're too far removed. It's time to get reconnected, folks. It's time to realize the cruel and sinful thing we do when we take the life of another animal, and we don't need to. I haven't eaten any animals in 33 years. For 29 years, I've been approximately, overall, 98% raw vegan. Very little cooked food, no animal products, and just turned 65 last month, and I've never felt better. I'm amazed every year I get older, and I can't believe I'm another year older, and I don't feel anything like I thought I might when I was a young kid. Thinking, oh my God, when you get old, you're going to fall apart. And yet I'm in better shape now at 65 than I was when I was 15 or even 25. Didn't start getting really serious about fitness until I was 28. But I've always been an athlete, always been in good shape. I've never been overweight. But still, here I am at 65, just as flexible, if not more flexible than I've ever been. I'm just as strong or stronger than I've ever been. I'm not near the level of endurance I was at one time when I was playing competitive tennis, but I was putting in 7-8 hours of hard exercise every day. Now I might put in 5 if I'm lucky. In fact, this week I'll average a 35-hour week, but it's very slow bicycling out in the woods because I'm a philosopher. This is my office. I come out here to get inspired. I don't come out here to exercise and get blood to my muscles. I want that blood to go to my brains. I want to do what the philosophers did in the 1800s, where they'd go for long 4- and 5-hour walks in the woods to get inspired to be amongst nature. And also, hopefully, to find people's lives that I can transform. And I'm a lucky man. I get to meet people every day when I come out here. I'm a lucky man. I have the best of two worlds. I get to be outside in nature whenever I want to, whenever the weather's the best, so I can escape. How does that phrase go? Get lost in nature and find peace. And I couldn't help but notice, where was that at? Okay. We got all these sunflowers next to me, and I was noticing something flying around, sucking off it. I was wondering what it was. It was just a small bee. And anyway, didn't have really a whole lot to say, except I've been biking by this little section of the bayou for some time now, and I keep seeing all these sunflowers, and I was wondering whether or not I could come out here somehow and set my camera up and have a nice backdrop. And I think this will be really nice. It should show up really nice. So I'll go ahead and sum up my video. Again, are we clever enough to overcome the negative ripple effect? Can we use that brilliant brain to modify a solid food vacation on water and do it with juices? Take the fourth thing we mastered, the machines, make a good application. Take that juice extractor, take 15, 20 pounds of produce, run it through that machine, let the machine do all the work, we don't waste any energy getting all that nutrition. And then we flush out all that garbage that's inside of our pipes. We bump up the biophotons in a way we can't do any other. According to Fritz Albert Popp, we go up to 114,000 biophotons on a solid food vacation. When we're supposed to be around 87,000, most of us are on 1 to 23,000, we're born at 43,000. This is a powerful nutrient that most of us don't realize is the most important nutrient we should be looking for in our food. And it's destroyed 100% when we cook our food. And because of that, everything else goes downhill big time. Again, we're too clever for our own good. We can molest our taste buds, our reptilian brain gets addicted to it, and now we're dealing with addictions and denial, and those are more of those problems of knowledge I mentioned. Now, for you guys who want to know more about these 21 main problems of knowledge, take a look at the Ultimate Solution playlist. It's an 11-part video series where I explain all 281 pieces I identified in my special teaching tool called the Ultimate Schematic. First 21 pieces of this schematic are the 21 main problems of knowledge. Today we briefly looked at piece number 9, that's our neocortex, and piece number 14, that's the herd mentality. And what I'm suggesting for us out there, for you fellow trim tabs, is let's put that brilliant brain to work so we can overcome those other brilliant brains that are molesting our taste buds by modifying a solid food vacation so we can reach the tipping point, so we can turn the herd away from this cliff, turn our ship away from that iceberg. And I know for a fact, I've thought about this way too often, that if we can reach the tipping point, it won't take but a couple years before we look back in horror and disbelief at where we were and what we were doing, and how we couldn't figure out there was such a simple solution to solve all those problems. And what's the obstacle? It's our neocortex. So let's make a good application to this brilliant brain of ours, and if we can do that, we'll be in for a treat.